China's bellicose attitude toward Taiwan, and any country that supports it, has been steadily increasing over the years. China regularly conducts exercises in the Taiwan Straits and goes as far as to surround the island with its air and naval forces. The exercises have also become more provocative as China routinely violates Taiwan's territorial sovereignty. The question is becoming less of a question of if China's President Xi Jinping will invade Taiwan, and more of a question of when. As a result, countries in the region have sharply increased diplomatic and military maneuvering to react to what is being considered an inevitable showdown between China, Taiwan, and their allies. For their part, Taiwan's military and political leaders have increased preparations to resist a Chinese invasion. A Chinese invasion of Taiwan is not a foregone conclusion and may be part of a plan to create so much external pressure on Taiwan that it will change internally, elect more pro-Chinese politicians, and thus be more amicable to align with China. It is anticipated that this could lead to a Hong Kong-China arrangement in Taiwan, eliminating the need for an invasion. The Taiwanese people, for their part, have been supporting more independent-minded candidates for political office, including the presidency, and this enrages the Chinese leadership, though some of the outrage seems less organic and more scripted to support a political agenda. The consideration that all the Chinese bellicose stances, threats, and violations of Taiwan's sovereignty are all part of political gamesmanship is a legitimate position, but it does entail risk. If Taiwan decides not to yield to China's demands, it will put China in a difficult position. China will either continue to escalate in the hope that the increased escalation and its duration may force a change, or it will have to invade or change course and lose face, as it will appear that the entire threat of an invasion was a bluff and damaged China's future credibility. The other, and most likely option, is that China is pursuing a course of action in the hopes of exerting pressure on Taiwan to comply with its demands without resorting to an invasion. However, to make this policy work and have teeth, China must prepare for an invasion in a very public way, and at some point, make the determination that its policy has failed to coerce the Taiwanese's compliance. It must choose the military option to invade when its political efforts fail. The Taiwanese government must decide whether to maintain its independence or submit to China. The electoral process has solidified the resolve to resist China's demands, necessitating a corresponding military readiness to demonstrate to the world that Taiwan will withstand a Chinese invasion. Taiwan's defense preparations have to be so thorough that the Chinese will see the operation as too risky. Taiwan also knows that it will most likely have help from the United States and Japan in case of a Chinese invasion, so it has to do its part to delay the conquest of the island long enough through inflicting casualties and determined resistance that the US and Japan can bring their military might to bear against the Chinese invasion force. This month's annual Taiwanese military exercises aim to replicate the island nation's resolute resistance. Han Kuang and Wanan's annual exercises were typically more for show than actual military preparedness. In the past, Taiwanese beachgoers would sunbathe during the scripted Chinese invasion at the beach, a testament to the scripted nature of these show exercises. With these exercises, the United States has been attempting to persuade the Taiwanese to change course and create a deeper and more effective resistance in the event of a Chinese invasion. The public received information last month about the non-scripted nature of this year's war games and the cancellation of the for show live fire demonstration. Units would deploy at likely Chinese invasion points in both harbors and airports, spreading the exercises across the country. The military also declared that the exercise would extend beyond daylight hours to encompass nighttime defense activities. The military aimed to demonstrate to the Taiwanese people the seriousness and resolve of the island's defense. The military leadership took these matters seriously, drawing references and lessons from Ukraine's defense against a far more powerful foe. The most significant change in the Taiwan strategy is the emphasis on operational and tactical changes to defense. Taiwan is replacing its centralized top-down authority with a more decentralized command structure and standing orders for its troops. The United States and the special forces sent to Taiwan to help train its forces have long advocated for this. Decentralization provides a number of benefits for the effectiveness of the Taiwanese military. It is assumed that the Chinese will target Taiwan's command and control infrastructure through electronic warfare or physical interdiction. This implies that the Chinese could cut off Taiwanese military units from their command, requiring them to act independently and without top-down direction or authority. The Taiwanese leadership must set clear objectives and rules of engagement for its troops, allowing them to execute them at the operational and tactical level without seeking direction from the strategic authority. The objectives and rules of engagement must be more generalized, giving individual commanders and units the leeway to interpret how best to meet the strategic objective. This decentralization strategy has advantages over a centralized command structure because it is generally faster to react in the action-reaction cycle of warfare. A decentralized unit does not have to wait for command authority to exploit local opportunities or avoid jeopardizing situations. The downside is that decentralization necessitates a higher level of training at all command levels. A decentralized force needs a high level of discipline and initiative. Commanders must also inform soldiers of the objectives so that the next level of leadership is aware of casualties. This is not an effortless process to create a true decentralized command structure, but it is an important factor in making the Taiwanese military effective against a much larger foe in China. The unpublicized part of the pursuit of decentralization is that it will better lend itself to creating guerrilla-type resistance in the mountain ranges of the central and eastern parts of the island. An organized and decentralized guerrilla resistance would make the task of conquering the island a much more costly operation in terms of both time and casualties for the Chinese. An untested Chinese military would have to conduct a complex seaborne and airborne operation against determined resistance, and then assume an anti-insurgency operation. Taiwan's decentralization strategy could allow its much smaller force to resist the Chinese nearly indefinitely and play its part in tying down Chinese forces around Taiwan, where they would be vulnerable to attacks from Taiwan's allies. Taiwan's decentralized effort could be the best way to effectively defend its nation against a much larger foe. It does require that Taiwan invest in a more professional force, or at least make its conscription training much more rigorous. Decentralization necessitates not only a well-trained force, but also constant training and investment in equipment and logistics to support the doctrine. Taiwan is a country of only 24 million people compared to China's 1.4 billion. So it must find ways to create the most effective combat multipliers in the force it fields. China would perceive Taiwan's long-term military commitment as a pledge to statehood, potentially altering China's policies. One could consider it a necessary sacrifice for Taiwan's freedom.